الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. وصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. وصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وسبحان الله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه صلى الله عليه وسلم. The last 10 days of Ramadan are upon us. Another Ramadan that has gone by very quickly. They seem to go by faster and faster. But this Ramadan has been very different and also not different. Philistine has not been something that is not something that's new. But what is new are our reactions to it. The amount of people and the spotlight that it is occupying in public discourse, both Muslim and non-Muslim. It's different because the grief and the shame are much heavier. Perhaps as heavy as they always should have been. Today, I want to talk about Surah An-Naml. And the reason why I want to talk about Surah An-Naml will become, I think, clear by the end. Surah An-Naml begins, as a lot of surahs do, with the testament of faith, an affirmation of the final day, and a idea that shows up a lot in the Quran, that those who commit bad deeds, who are unjust, that Allah makes it for them so that they become almost unable to see the error of their ways. They become lost in delusion. It says this in different parts of the Quran. And I term this the law of delusion with the unjust. And as you see throughout the entirety of the surah, this is revisited upon over and over and over again. In verses 7 through 13, where we go through the story of Musa alayhi salam. And Musa is someone who is at that point in life when he first communes with Allah and is given his mission to go to Pharaoh and to warn him. He is someone who is powerless. He is someone who he's just trying to take care of his family, and he's stranded in a desert. He's someone who does not have a lot of influence. And yet he is given the mission to go to Pharaoh, who's perhaps the most powerful person on the planet at that time, if not one of them, and to tell him something that he is really not going to like to hear. Tell him something that will probably get him killed. Tell him something that if it does not get him killed, will definitely see that, remember, he's going to the desert with his family, and they're hungry, and he's looking for something for them. It's definitely going to lead to wherever they're heading. And to him not being able to take care of them. the loss of safety, the loss of food. He carries out this mission, and this isn't covered in the surah, but we know elsewhere in the Quran, what the other parts of his story and his mission, and the Exodus, and what happens with him and his followers, the incident of the cow, them lapsing back into old customs. There are a lot of examples in Musa's story that if it were to happen to us, and when things similar like that happen to us, we consider that a failure. We consider that, he didn't succeed. But then right after that, verses 15 through 44, we get to the story of Sulaiman, who in a lot of ways is the exact opposite of Musa. He has power, he has might, he has a kingdom. Not only does he have command over people, he has command over birds, he has command over jinn. And the Quran highlights how Sulaiman, even with all of this power, is constantly affirming the domain and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's humble, but he's powerful. When I was reflecting on this surah, the reason why I wanted to discuss this in light of what I have seen, what I've witnessed since October 7th, is because not many people want to be a Musa. But all of us want to be Sulaiman. We all want to be the person who has the power, who has the influence, who has the ability to effect change. But we do not want to be the person who has to go face the possible sacrifice of life, of property, of safety. But Surah An-Naml clearly shows us that there's actually not that big of a difference between Musa and Sulaiman. So let's continue. Sulaiman, the first story you encounter is him with the ants. He's marching with his army of birds and jinn and human in ranks. They're organized. They're in every aspect, they are completely impressive. And he comes across ants that see him coming, and he's able to commune with them. And so they're freaking out. We need to get out of the way or we're going to be crushed. And he stops for them. And he orders his army to stop for them. Now, on the first glance, this sounds like, wow, Sulaiman's a really amazing guy. He's all the way up here and he's stopping for these lowly ants. What humility. And that's true. But I think it's something more than that. I think that Sulaiman, in his complete and utter taqwa, realizes, it's not a thought, it's already ingrained in him. He is no more important than these ants. And these two stories, this is how Surah An-Naml is beginning. It goes on for a lot longer. Is confronting us with the truth that we, as a human being who's very flawed, whose perception needs light and needs something to help it see clearly, looks at someone who's in Musa's situation and looks at someone who's in Sulaiman's situation as dramatically different. I favor one over the other. But both of them are exactly, they're both people who are acknowledging the domain and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're both people that are delivering the message. And what makes Sulaiman truly great is his correct belief that the ants are just as important as him. That he's exactly the same as the ants. His greatness is not determined by the power he has, by the influence he has, because all of those things were given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His job, his role, and his worth is only in his affirmation of Allah's greatness. This same sentiment is in Surah Abasa, that begins with telling the story that I'm sure all of us are familiar with, of the Prophet ﷺ wanting to speak with influential elites in Mecca and turning away, frowning at a blind man who was seeking to talk to him. You turned, and he's told you turned away from the person who is sincere about seeking me in favor of trying to pursue the ones who are completely oblivious to my existence. But back to Surah An-Naml. So the next part is Sulaiman gets to Sheba. And Sheba's power, even though we're not really given much to go on in terms of how powerful she is, but from the context, we can assume she's powerful. You know, she's in the same league as Sulaiman. But there's one difference between the two of them, really. One difference that's at least is highlighted in the Quran with the limited information that we're given, and that is correct belief. That is affirmation of Allah, of the final day, and a human's role as a vicegerent of Allah. And when we are given these examples, he uses a lot of the same methods that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used with Musa to dissuade him. Magic shows different examples of magic to say this is the correct path. Now the thing about magic is it would be a lot more impressive now. It's not that it wasn't impressive then, but magic is not really, I'm not talking about, Chris Angel magic or whatever. I'm talking about very different type of magic. You know what I mean? It was a language of that time. It was an epistemology of that time. It was a way of influencing people. And Surah An-Naml comes around the same time as Surah Shu'ara that talks about that more fully, but I'll digress too much if I get into that. The main point of this is you see two examples of powerful kingdoms. You see one example of a powerful kingdom that has correct belief, and you see one example of a powerful kingdom that has incorrect belief. Now Sheba, once she sees these signs that Sulaiman gives her, she listens. But the point isn't that. The point is power alone is not enough. You need power to impact change. But having power without correct belief, without a foundation on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when I say correct belief, I mean the entirety of the Quran. I mean the realization of the final day, as if it is something that is right there in front of you. Not a theoretical construct that I've become habituated in talking about, but something that is impending, as if I can see it. There was a khutbah long time ago that talked about it's as if a gun is right there, that you feel the impending and inescapable nature of the final day, as if someone is holding a gun to your head. Verse 59 through 60 of Surah An-Naml goes like this, and this is the Muhammad Asad translation of the surah. Say, all praise is due to God, and peace be upon those servants of His whom He chose. Is not God far better than anything to which men falsely ascribe a share in His divinity? Nay, who is it that has created the heavens and the earth, and sends down for you life-giving water from the skies? For it is by this means that we cause gardens of shining beauty to grow, where it is not in your power to cause even one single of its trees to grow. Could there be any divine power besides God? Nay, those who think so are people who swerve from the path of reason. It's amazing today that now it is you try to convince people that believing in God makes sense. At least in this country, it's so secularized. Because the truth is, it's insane, I think, to not believe in God. But these verses are interesting because why does Allah say share in His divinity? I mean, we have Sheba who were sun worshippers, and that on the surface is true. But because the things that those other, both Pharaoh and Sheba, rely on, the things that they're dependent on, are the things that they think they are getting power from are not God. And that's really, I mean, throughout the second half of the surah, you have this refrain, could there be any divine power besides God? Because this is the full thrust of the surah. It made complete sense for Musa to do what he did. Because it wasn't Pharaoh that had power over his life. It wasn't the different things, that whatever town he would get to that could offer him that would keep his family secure. It was Allah. And same with Sulaiman. It wasn't his own ability or his own command over birds and jinn and humans that gave him power. It was Allah. And today, this is extremely relevant. Because usually the things that we use to rationalize everything from not praying to not becoming involved with a certain cause, that's the thing we're sharing in divinity with. That is the thing that I am taking as my God. And that includes myself. Because that's usually present in all situations, that someone is taking themselves as their God, whether they realize it or not. The other thing that is interesting about this verse are the gardens. Gardens take time to grow. It took, and all of this is from the project Abou Halakas, by the way. But I want to talk more about that at the end. um, between Musa and between Sulaiman are many dedicated and deliberate steps by people who are like ants. When I say like ants, what are ants like? Not small and brittle, that's not the point. They're loyal, they're dedicated, but most importantly, they're united in a single cause. They'll sacrifice their life for that cause, but they're not running out of their way to sacrifice their life. They're working diligently towards it, slowly, in the same way that a garden grows, through consistent rainfall. It takes time. It took time between Musa and Sulaiman. We don't know how long. But also sometimes it doesn't take that long. I mean, it will take time. But I think we look at the situation that we're in and we think, how is anything going to change? But how long was it between the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam getting the first revelation and Fath Mecca? It wasn't that long. An ant is not thinking about the time. And actually the people usually, and I can speak for myself, we all do this. When we're thinking about the time, it's because already we have decided we don't want to do this thing and we're looking for an excuse to not do it. Something that allows me to stop it but not feel guilty about it. In the second khutbah, I will continue this and talk a little bit about our movements and what I think we can do about this. Ask your Lord for forgiveness. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وسبحان الله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه صلى الله عليه وسلم. I've seen a lot of movements in my life for different reasons. And one of the greatest barriers to movements being successful, I think, is when the people involved with that movement are unable to get over themselves. To put it differently, it's when people put personalities over principles rather than putting principles over personalities. People often contain a lot of different intentions within them. They sincerely want change and want what is good. But they also have built an addiction to themselves and are trapped with themselves. Do not know how to overcome themselves. Do not know how to overcome their wants, their needs, what they think they need, what they've been told they should have, what they've been taught that they cannot live without. Those are the things that lead them into misguidance, into becoming accomplices to evil. when people are duplicitous and are working within a movement for their own personal gain, it sabotages the movement. These are people that have taken, and this is all of us, myself included. I mean, I say that every single khutbah. I qualify it with this as all of us, because truthfully, I see all of these things in myself. I think that the main difference is there are people that are honest about the things going on in themselves. And there are people who are pretending like it's not that way. There are people who are pretending that they are Sulaiman. People that are pretending through a veneer of charisma, an impressive speech. But we have all, or we would not be human, taken our desires as our God. The reason why I'm bringing this up and being very careful with my words is because there are also people who use the Quran and use Islam to say, well, what can we do about Philistine? It's all in Allah's hands. That use it to not do anything. They say, you would just focus on yourself. That's even more deplorable. And that is not what I am talking about. Last khutbah that I gave, I talked about both being the same thing, the inward and the outward. Because what I see with movements is that perhaps the anger and the rage, the justified anger and the rage, is energy that carries you a certain way, but eventually it will run out. And what you will be left with are your habits. What you will be left with is what's underneath that. Because what's your main fuel that's carrying you through life? If your main fuel that's carrying you through life is securing safety through a career, and my Islam is just going to the masjid for community events, but I really don't have that deep of a relationship with the Quran. I don't, I'm not dedicated to any cause. If that's your main fuel through life, and October 7th, you just started to become involved, it's not going to be enough. It's going to run out. And I don't mean that in any criticism to you, because the generations before us did not prepare us for success. We've been robbed of our religion. We've been robbed of the parts of our religion that truly make a difference, that are truly miraculous, by being told to focus on the superficial, ritualistic aspects of faith, while not understanding what's actually in this book. It won't be enough, because eventually you yourself will sabotage it. You will sabotage it because you've not learned how to lead a principled life. And leading a principled life is in all aspects of your life. How you do anything is how you do everything. You cannot tell yourself, well, I'm really truthful and self-sacrificing in this realm, but when it comes to this other realm, you forget it. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Everyone wants to be a Sulaiman, because everyone wants to be the one to bring about change, to own change. Everyone wants to be at the front, to have credit. But that's not who Sulaiman was. Sulaiman and Musa were the same people in their hearts at different times with different roles. So what is our role? We don't have time anymore. Truthfully, we have not had time for a very long time. 2 years ago, red cows were flown out to Israel in preparation for a ritualistic sacrifice that will bring about the prerequisites that are the prerequisites for consecrating land to build a temple on, the third temple. And now this has started to come up again. In terms of, there have been articles about it this last week. It is my belief that we have lost Mecca a long time ago. And we're about to lose Al-Aqsa. We don't have time anymore. We do not have time for personalities. We don't have time for you, for me, to not get it together and become the example of what a Muslim is supposed to be. We don't have time for me to not learn how to take the esteemed position of an ant. And if you don't understand why I'm saying the esteemed position, then we have a problem. Because there is nothing more lowly to me than a person who only acts in their own self-interest, who acts as an island. That's not the greatness of what the human race does. That is self-infatuation and fantasy. The fantasies of a child who wants to be a superhero, who wants to be a Malcolm X, who wants to have people's adoration. The true miracle of a human being is our ability to organize and to work together and to bring a just stewardship on this earth that leaves it more beautiful than before they arrived. But with that comes the possibility to leave it more ugly than before they arrived. And unfortunately, that's what we see happening. We don't have time. The last 10 days of Ramadan are upon us. And in these last 10 days, what I ask of you is to recommit yourselves, not to community events in the masjid, not to iftars, not to socializing is what I'm saying, but recommit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to finding what the Quran is, to realizing that you do have enough energy to do the self-work and the outer work. I view what we do here as Usuli at Usuli and everyone, I love this group because everyone is very unique. Everyone has their own cause. Everyone has their own approach. And I respect and love all of them. Because a lot of us, most of us, went through a very intense study of the Quran, led by Dr. Khalid Abou Fadl, Project Illumine. And what that left me with on the other side was a sense of self, a sense of certainty about what I am doing here, a sense of certainty about the importance of the Quran that I did not expect. And when I look at the people that went through that program with me, I see the same thing in their eyes and in their actions. It does not mean that we're perfect. A lot of people want to dive into Project Illumine, but often it's a very common complaint that it's a lot. It's 500 plus hours. It's very long. How do we finish it? If you go and do a YouTube search on Quran programs, you will probably find, most organizations will give you 10 hours of content. A 15-minute video on Surah Al-Baqarah. I think it's kind of crazy to complain about there being so much for free. But you have the time. It's just, if you're saying you don't have the time, it's because it's not a priority. That's the truth. These are free because what you do with them is up to you. They're free because they were given freely, because we do not expect anything in return for them. My sincere hope is that Project Illumine and what we do here illuminates your life, even if we never hear from you. And that maybe you will go illuminate someone else's life. Because I pray every day that you will recognize the importance of the Quran in bringing about change in this world. That without God, it is pointless. Without God, it will fail. Either it will fail to come to be, or it will fail after it comes to be. People say that power corrupts. And I challenge that. I think godless power corrupts. I don't think Sulaiman was corrupt. This is too important. And that's all that I can say. I can't convince you, I can't give you the words that adequately express why it is so important, because it's something that you have to experience. It is it's as simple as that. And if you're someone who feels that thirst inside and who wants the thirst for change, the thirst to do something, I said this, what we do is transparent and is online and there for everyone to use in the way that they see fit. Because guidance is not my job. That's Allah's domain. And there is no one better to dispense of that duty But if you do need help, we're here. I'll end with this. In Surah An-Naml, I found this verse very comforting. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Musa this in the beginning when first speaking to him. After seeing the staff turn and, come alive, he gets very scared. And Allah says this, fear not, for no fear need the message bearers have in my presence, and neither need anyone who has done wrong and then replace the wrong with good. For surely I am much forgiving, a dispenser of grace. You don't need to fear Allah if you're a messenger of Allah, or if you're someone who has done wrong and replaced the wrong with good. Obviously, these two are mentioned together because of Musa's past. But this is the firmest handhold that you can have. This is the nature of your Lord. Allah is not someone who is watching you and nitpicking over what you wear and what you say and whether you say enough Arabic phrases. And if you don't do it, then He's upset with you. That sounds very human. That sounds like a very controlling human being to me. Allah is merciful. Allah is beautiful. Allah wants the best for you. Allah wants you to doesn't want you to be perfect. Allah wants you to be humble, to grow. Because that is the miracle of a human being. Allah, please forgive our sins. Guide us on the straight path. Help us to see the error of our ways. Help us to see what the right next step is. Help us to turn our lives and our fears over to you. Help us to turn our thoughts and our actions over to you. Help us to honor our lineage and honor our religion. Help us to realize that every moment is a moment to reconnect. Every moment is a potential new beginning. Help us to defeat the whispers that take place in our hearts and our minds, and keep us on the straight path. Ya Allah, please bless those in Palestine, bless those in Yemen, bless those in Sudan. Help them. Help all those suffering around the world, including the ones in this country. Ya Allah, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Waqim as-salah.